Hey everybody, this is Rob, the titular bear, providing some color commentary for this thing. We're starting off with nobody really ready to play, facing Sam, who's using his personal shield and his longsword.
Next.
So nobody was really ready to start, not even the cameraman. What you can see here, though, is one of the keys to Viking sword and shield interpreted by the Hurstwait group. The shield and sword are held together on the same half of the body, closing one line and leaving the opposite line exposed. A good sword and board practitioner can bait the enemy into attacking the open line, and when that attack comes, they swing the punch grip shield over to close that line, and simultaneously attack the exposed arm with the coiled sword. You'll see that in practice later. That's the idea. Right here, you can see me attacking a totally closed line as well, and then pushing Sam off camera. So we lose the resolution of the video, but as it happened, the judges called the round in my favor.
Hit. 2.
Here I'm facing Random, one of our better fighters with a fair bit of kendo experience. You can see here what I was talking about earlier. Bait the weapon strike to an open line, bring your shield around to close that line and defend the attack, and then simultaneously attack their open line, which in this case is Random's head, using your sword.
Hey.
Because I know some folks are going to ask what's up with the armor and shield I'm wearing, I've actually got some answers. The shield is a single layer of linden and it's rimmed in hide, so it's reasonably accurate there, albeit a little bit small. I prefer a smaller and more mobile shield. But the boss actually cracked a little while ago and I haven't gotten a replacement yet, so we actually capped it in a pretty big hurry using a rimmed dog bowl. It held up surprisingly well through the day. Now, Dave is actually doing something pretty neat in this fight. Having watched the other fighters, he's not trying to attack into any of the real open lines I'm giving him. Through the whole fight, he actually kept trying to throw an Unterhau against my shield hand and wrist, trying to get underneath my shield from Olber. I give him full credit for learning from the other fighters and for trying something new.
Fraction buckle? 133 in a budget.
Yep.
Mismatched weapons are a big part of our bear pits, both because practicing against mismatched weapons is fun and exciting, and because the purpose of a bear pit is to have fun and test a fighter's conditioning. So the actual weapons being used don't matter so much as just grabbing what seems is going to be fun for 25, 30, or in my case, 38 matches in succession. This exchange is a good reminder about the importance of displacing your feet. Sam actually fooled me into thinking he was swinging high, and you can see my shield track that. And were it not for my displacement to my forward right and the removal of my shield leg during that displacement, he would have struck successfully.
Abs ahead.
This whole fight is one giant fun mess. I'm playing with a small sword against a guy with a decade or so worth of epee training who's using a windlass swept hilt training rapier. Coming back to the issue of armor, I normally wear spalders over my arming clothes when I fight. I don't like getting hit in the point of the shoulders. But I play ice hockey too, and the night before this whole bear pit happened, I'd actually blocked several pucks off my torso, so I had several bruises to start with, and the cuirass is mainly being worn just so they wouldn't be further aggravated. The end of this fight shows the impact of weapon mass and the use of the strong of the blade. I actually picked up the incoming thrust with my sword, but I got it relatively near my mid-blade, and so my parry didn't have enough weight behind it to actually change the trajectory of the heavier incoming rapier. You can see my hilt rotate to my left underneath the rapier blade during the slow motion. Most of my historical rapier and buckler research came from helping start the SCA rapier program back at Miami of Oxford in the late 1990s. I haven't really touched it a lot since. It's not something I come across very often. Recently, I've been working up I-33 sword and buckler, and you can see it bleed into this fight, even though it's not really the same thing at all.
Wait, who has the orbital sword now?
Point. Point.
This is a good example of why we drill distance judgment so heavily. I'm able to piston out of Ben's attempted bind using his axe head and counter thrust to his face. His return strike to my torso using his axe is short by about 2 inches. If I wasn't sure I'd be safe due to the distance involved, I might have retreated from his bind instead of leveraging my reach advantage to win the exchange.
That's a hit.
This is 15.
Something that can be hard to teach is to get someone who isn't naturally aggressive to learn how to seize the vor and go on the offensive. In the case of this fight, I have 38 bouts to do in a row, so I'm content to sit back and just breathe for as long as Sam will let me. A good part of this fight just ended up being moving between various ready positions, mainly to see what Sam would do. I have to respect his reach, but my goal through quite a lot of this fight was to attempt to pin his sword against his shield rim, since he was so thoughtfully leaving it out there for me. Here I'm shifted between the more normal Viking shield guards and playing around with some of the I-33 stuff I've been researching. The thought here was to use the underarm guard from I-33 to stab knock into Sam's blade, pinning it in place against the shield. Or at least, as a transition between guards, baiting him into making some sort of offensive action.
You take big steps.
You talked about getting one with a paw print on the front so you can leave impressions.
The end of this fight is largely a regression to old SCA shield fighting techniques that I learned 20 years ago, save for the lack of wrap shots because I couldn't recall if Sam had back of the head protection. Mostly it's a lot of deliberate strikes to closed lines intended to pull his shield up and out of place, and then strike to his torso once the shield had moved. Do note the active shield bind against his sword as he tries to bring his sword up from a low position. This is another one of those bits I'm pulling over from my arming sword and buckler research.
Recording.
This fight is largely where the wheels sort of came off the cart for the day. Up to now, I'd been doing reasonably well with a 13-2 record, and one of those losses was fighting a weapon, small sword, that I mainly trained in only insofar as I could do stage combat with it. And I was fighting against a guy with a decade of training in purely thrusting swords. So, going and playing in his wheelhouse, it's not a surprise that I lost the batch.
Don't wait too long. Right.
Oh, which one are we at? Alright, well, we're at 38.
I'm still unsure what actually happens at the conclusion of this fight. Robert, my opponent, displaces to his left and brings up an Unterhau that is somehow vertical enough to catch and lift my mask a bit, but somehow not vertical enough to catch the projecting shield boss. I'd really like a better angle on this. The difference between real fights and the fights that I choreograph, among others, is that I can't always guarantee the best angle in the real fights. This is a deceptively interesting fight for all that it's all of 3 seconds. Bjorn tends to be a buffle. He's big and strong and fast, and he tends to wind up a bit for his swings, especially Oberhaus. So in this case, being in left flug, I extend into a thrust during his wind-up, a technique called Nachreisen. However, the strange thing that happens here is that, as I try and wind my sword up to right ox to ward off his Oberhau, Bjorn's forearm comes down on my sword, bending it and pinning it in place against his chest. I'm not actually sure what to do about this. It's never happened before performing Nachreisen, and I'm unsure what in my technique I could change to make it less of a problem, or whether it's something specific to fighting left-handers, or whether it would even be a problem in the first place if we were using steel instead of hyper-flexible synthetics. It's definitely something I have to look into in greater depth. One of our normal sparring guidelines is that we don't generally take people all the way to the ground. We're fighting on an 1/8-inch thick rubber mat over a concrete surface, and absolutely nobody wants to fall on it, not even the people who know how to fall. That's why you see Random and I trying to back out of the Krieg here, instead of wrestling like we're supposed to. Not everybody remembers that we don't generally take people to the ground, though. Ben does a really good job here anticipating my Shielhau into his long point, and lifting his long point into Kron, taking my sword with it. He did it with such force that to hold on to my sword, I was lifted bodily to my toes, which then left me vulnerable to a hip check from somebody who's 80 pounds heavier than I am, with predictable results. After skipping a few fights for excessive camera shake, we now arrive at the silly portion of the evening's entertainment. I have next 2 successive matches against the pairing of Bjorn and Maria, Bjorn being the larger one. The previous few matches, plus that solid fall we all enjoyed watching a moment ago, have rather taken the wind from my sails at this point, and you can see the effects. Movements are much less precise, and my fighting stance and footwork get increasingly sloppy from here on out. In the first round, Maria scores the win by virtue of slipping a blow underneath my shield that I honestly never even saw. There's a second wind in the second match, and so that sees me able to isolate Maria via quick lateral movement, putting her between myself and Bjorn. Once she's eliminated, Bjorn throws yet another Oberhau, which is easily intercepted by my shield, and he takes a return blow on the abdomen. Thinking about it, I may have hit him in the same place during every single fight. Ouch. Oh, with the booming of the shield strike echoing in my ears, I can't really hear the judge's call on the first blow, and so I followed up with what is probably the hardest hit I make on the day, straight to Bjorn's head. The takeaway here is that multiple opponents are a huge chore to fight, even if you're exceptionally skilled. And I'm not. Realistically, your hope is to do exactly what I did in the second match. Isolate fighters, and reduce the fight to a series of one-on-one matches in very quick succession. Here we see another effect of fatigue. My opponent's concentration wavers for a moment, and so I throw a Zwerchhau into his Vontag. I fail to sufficiently displace or to angle my blow in order to secure his weapon, leaving him free to strike a snap reaction against my forearm. My mind was in the right place, but my body at this point simply wasn't keeping up, and so this is scored as a double rather than a clean win. This fight is less about technique and more about having a lot of just general fighting experience. I fooled my opponent by keeping a soft visual focus near his thighs, and in the moment by dropping my sword shoulder and my hands just slightly, convincing him that I would strike around his low line. He dropped his sword and started to move across his body toward a left flug, and while he was thinking purely about that defense, I struck to the head, which he wasn't thinking about defending anyway. Even when you're tired, if you can outthink your opponent, then you still have a chance. Last, and for my ego certainly least, we present the 38th fight of the evening. I had about 2 years of Kodokan Judo experience back in high school, and have worked with a variety of techniques since then, which have built off parts of that, such as U.S. Army close combatives. Now, Maria, on the other hand, has a father who's a 6th Dan black belt in Judo. He runs his own Judo school. He taught her since she could walk, and she has something like 20 years of competitive experience in Judo. So I'm on my back foot before we start, and every judoka knows that your back foot is a very bad place to be. Doing sport judo without gis is an interesting experience. You normally want to latch onto the thick sleeve or lapel, and even my arming gear doesn't have the rigidity that a gi offers, which in turn decreases the leverage that we can generate against the opponent. Likewise, long hair can definitely get in the way of your grip. I eventually managed to muscle Maria into a very sloppy osotogari, but don't get any power behind it because I didn't step in far enough with my left leg and the right side of my body. I try a few times once we're on the ground to isolate Maria's far arm and lean back into an arm bar. But Maria is easily experienced enough to feel that coming, and so she rotates underneath me, defending her arm and, incidentally, putting my weight backwards into kind of a seiza position. I'm not experienced enough to shoot my legs backward to keep my weight centered. It looked a lot easier when I was watching the Summer Olympics. Once I fall backwards, she rolls across my chest in what I believe is a katagatami shoulder hold. I try once for a bridge escape. It's where you arch your back to gain space and you roll. But at that point, my back gives a firm, no, you're old. So I decide that discretion is the better part of valor and tap out. Plus, having her win keeps my wife happy, so really, it's a moral victory. Well, there you have it. 38 years, 38 fights, one very, very long day. The final score ends up being 23 wins, 9 losses, and 6 doubles, which gives a respectable 60% win rate. Not terrible for a morning's work. If you're one of those few, those happy few, who run across this video on YouTube and are looking for historical European martial arts in the greater Cincinnati, Ohio area, give us a look at www.queencityswordguild.com or on Facebook under Queen City Sword Guild. Thanks for watching.